Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Form CMS 1763, and that is to terminate Medicare. Specifically, we'll be talking about Medicare Part B. Before we jump into today's video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on your bell notifications so you're always notified whenever I'm posting new content. If you enjoyed the video or you got something out of it, you learned something new, please make sure to give it a like because it does help out the channel tremendously. And if you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to reply as soon as I see it. All right, so first we're going to start off on completing this actual form, kind of the applicable dates. You can see that I have something filled out down here. And then other very relevant information. I'm going to try my best just to primarily stick to terminating Medicare Part B because in talking about this form, it's very easy to go off into other subjects. And I might do a video kind of elaborating on some of these details a little bit more as we go on, or if you have any questions, again, please let me know. And it might generate a whole nother video. The complexities of Social Security and Medicare are tremendous. I can't stress enough how unique and individual everybody's situation really is. Again, I often use the example, you and your twin brother could have been married to twin sisters and their situation is completely different than yours. Okay, so keep that in mind. When filling out the form, you're going to start off with your name. That's pretty self-explanatory. Your Medicare number. So if you look on your Medicare card, you should have a red, white, and blue card. Your MBI number, which stands for Medicare Beneficiary Identification, that is your Medicare number. At one point, it used to be a Social Security number, depending on whatever record that you were receiving benefits on. So it would have been a Social Security number with maybe the letter A on it, which represents your own record. If it had a B, that means you're a spouse under somebody else. If you had a D, that means that you're a survivor, under maybe a spouse or divorced spouse or something like that. Name of person if other than enrollee who is executing this request. Realistically, the only person who this would pertain to would be if you had maybe a representative payee, which is somebody who manages your Social Security benefits for you, and maybe they're completing this form on your behalf. Is this request for termination of hospital insurance, other known as Medicare Part A, or medical insurance, also known as supplemental, also known as supplemental medical insurance or Medicare Part B. Okay, and again, for today's purpose, we're going to try our best to stick to Medicare Part B. All right, date supplemental medical insurance will end. So this is pretty important. I don't know why this box is left to the claimant to fill out. This should probably be something that Social Security fills out because of something called the month after the month rule. So what this means is once your Medicare Part B is established and effective, so let's as an example say that you turn 65 sometime in February. It doesn't matter what day of the month you turn 65. Medicare always begins on the first of the month. So if your birthday was February 15th, your Medicare is going to start on February 1st. All right. So let's, for example's sake, let's change this to January real quick. All right. So let's say that you turned 65 in January of 2023, and we're using, today is January 4th. So let's say today you completed this request and you turn it into the Social Security office. They have something called the month after the month rule. So what this means is any month that you ask for your Medicare coverage to stop, you are responsible for that month and the following month. And then on that third month, that would be the first occasion that you would no longer have Medicare, specifically Part B. Okay, so again, let's say that your Medicare Part B was effective with January 1st of 2023. Today you submit your request. You would have to pay for January and February, and then March 1st would be your first day without the Medicare Part B coverage, and you would no longer have to pay. If, let's say it was the same situation, but it was February that you turned 65, and we were on or after February 1st, then at that point, Again, you would be responsible for February and March, and April 1st would be your first day without Medicare Part B. So let's say, just as an example, let's say that maybe you enrolled in December for your upcoming 65th birthday in January. And let's say that on December 31st, you maybe mailed this form to the Social Security office. It's super, and you didn't want to pay those extra months. It's super important to know that the Social Security office should be using the date stamp on your envelope. So again, if let's say you turned 65 in January 23, but you mailed them this, and maybe you filed the application for Medicare at the beginning, let's say December 1st, right? So let's say December 1st you filed to start January 1st, and then you mailed them this form December 31st to basically refuse the coverage, since it hasn't officially started as of December 31st at that point. You would want to make sure that they use that December 31st date so that you don't have to pay for February or for January and February. Because if you refuse it or you stop it before it starts, now the month after the month rule no longer applies, and it's almost as if you refused it in the first place and you never signed up for it. So super important there. You always want to make sure that you articulate in this box right here, and it says, I request termination of my enrollment under the above sections of the Title 18 of the Social Security Act. Title 18 is Medicare specifically, of the Social Security Act as amended for the reasons. You always want to articulate the reason why you're doing it in the event that Social Security drops the ball, and for whatever reason they mess up, whatever the case may be. So again, going back to our example of, right, you filed your claim for Medicare, let's say A and B at the beginning of December, but then December 31st you mail them this form and say, no, I don't want it. Then at that point, if you wrote in here, as an example, I do not need Medicare Part B because I will continue to maintain my group health plan through my active employer. Okay, so this would be a perfect example of, let's say that they did process it with January. Anytime it comes to health insurance, when you mail documents, it would behoove you to use tracking information. So whether it's USPS, UPS, FedEx, whatever you want to do, make sure that you can track it so that you have proof of the date that you mailed it. And then if they ended up using that January date, not realizing that your date stamp was in December before your coverage began, now you've created the argument to say no, to basically protest it, because they'll send you a letter saying, okay, we process your request. You're still going to have to pay for January and February. The first instance without Part B would be March. If you disagree, please fill out Form SSA 561. So then in your 561, you could argue, well, no, on my 1763, it was dated, December 31st of 2022. I mailed it December 31st of 2022, and I even put in there that I don't need it because of my insurance at work. So again, this helps better create your argument, because if you don't put it in writing and they don't have it in writing and there's no proof, with Social Security, the burden of proof always lies on the claimant. So you have to prove your argument, essentially, almost like you're guilty until found innocent sort of situation. So that's where that would come up. We're going to hop over here to this publication that I found on SSA.gov. So if you just go to SSA.gov, you scroll all the way to the bottom where it says publications, and then you type in how to apply for Medicare Part B. This should pop right up. There's a lot of really good information on here. How to apply, what if I don't sign up, what's a special enrollment period. I believe I've touched base on that before in my video about completing the CMS 40B and the L564. So reference that video if you need to for those definitions and those dates. Really what I'm looking for on here is this note right here, this top right-hand corner paragraph, because it basically discusses what credible coverage is. So anytime that you refuse Medicare Part B and you're after the age, you are at or after the age of 65, it's important to know how to avoid any kind of penalties in the event you find yourself in a situation where you have to enroll into Medicare Part B later. Which I will say is the overwhelming majority of people. If you plan on retiring and maintaining your life within the United States, whether you have any sort of other health insurance besides Medicare, once that insurance company finds out that you're eligible for Medicare, whether it's based off your age or a disability or maybe renal disease, something like that, if they know that you're eligible for Medicare, they 9 times out of 10 are going to require you to sign up for Medicare, because Medicare at that point becomes the primary insurance. And if you know anything about insurance companies, pretty much their business model is, they don't, if they can avoid paying for it, they will. So if there's any instance where you're eligible for Medicare, they're going to require you to take it. Otherwise, they might drop you. They might reject any sort of billing or anything like that. So just make sure to contact your carrier and verify, whatever your situation might be. Excuse me. So credible coverage. Again, if you're asking for Medicare past the age of 65, in order to avoid the general enrollment period, which is basically the annual enrollment period, or the annual enrollment season, might be a better way to put it, and to avoid penalties, you have to have credible coverage. The only thing that is considered credible coverage for Medicare purposes are when you or your spouse are actively employed, going to work, receiving a paycheck, and you have a deduction out of your paycheck pretty much for health insurance, right? So that would be an example of an active employee. Medicare, or for Medicare purposes, does not recognize any marketplace coverage like Obamacare. They do not recognize any sort of COBRA insurance coverage, any retiree policies, or anything from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So what that means is if you're a service-connected veteran, or maybe one way or the other you have your health care coverage from the VA, that is not recognized as credible coverage. And if you go to the VA, when usually at any VA you go to, when you walk in, if you have an appointment, you'll walk up to a kiosk, you'll start to check in, and one of the very first questions that they ask is, are you eligible for Medicare or Medicaid, right? They want to know that right away, probably for this reason. Again, Medicare is usually the primary insurance that gets run first. Same with COBRA. You might get offered COBRA if you have a, let's say maybe you retire before the age of 65, could be an instance of when you get it. So let's say you retired at 62. So from 62 to 65, you might be eligible for COBRA, depending on your, employer's agreement, whatever you have. Or let's say, I would say a big one is a severance package. So let's say that you're 65 years old, something's going on with your employer. They offer you a severance package as like an early out, and then part of that package, they say, we'll pay for COBRA for the next 24 months. That sounds great until you don't have to pay for COBRA for the next 24 months, and then you go to enroll in Medicare, and now you have, maybe you have a 20% penalty on your Part B premiums for life because they don't recognize that COBRA coverage. Super important there. I've seen that. That is, I wouldn't say that's common, but I also would not say that it's uncommon. I've seen a number of severance agreements that offer COBRA coverage, whether it's paid for or not, and people take it thinking that they'll be good to go for Medicare, and then they end up with a penalty. And if you have that penalty, there's usually no way around it, unless you were misinformed by Social Security. But again, they put all this information out there to avoid that. And then again, with the marketplace coverage like Obamacare, that is not recognized. Again, just to reiterate, the only coverage that is considered credible coverage for Medicare purposes and avoiding any kind of penalty for a late enrollment would be you or your spouse are actively employed and going to work, and that's how you have your insurance. And then the last thing here too is retiree health coverage. So let's say usually this would be somebody like a state employee or a county employee, some sort of government municipality. You work there for 20, 25 years, whatever it might have been. You retire, and then maybe, I would say the majority of the time, you get offered like Blue Cross Blue Shield. Again, if you don't sign up for Medicare at 65, that retiree policy is not considered credible coverage, and if you enroll later, you will have a penalty. The same goes with retired military and TRICARE. So let's say you enlisted in the military in your 20s, you retired in your 40s, you're going to have TRICARE until you're 65, at which point your TRICARE is going to convert from TRICARE to TRICARE for life. So where you didn't have to pay for TRICARE, and I believe technically you don't pay for TRICARE for life, TRICARE for life makes you enroll into Medicare. And I believe that they'll drop you if you don't. I could be wrong on that, so contact TRICARE or whoever helps you with that to verify. But if you're retired military, just know that when you turn 65, you still have to sign up for Medicare. Otherwise, it's going to create a problem for you. Maybe not instantly. It might take them a little bit to figure it out. But once they do, you can rest assured they're going to tell you, sign up for Medicare or you're basically going to create a problem for yourself, however that looks like. All right. Kind of the last thing I want to go jump back to is it might actually be on here as well. We're going to word search HSA. HSA is a health savings account, and this is pertaining to Medicare Part A. So let's say that you're somebody who is approaching 65, or maybe you just turned 65, whatever the case may be, and let's say you're thinking about signing up for Medicare Part A. In most cases, just about all, or the majority, I should say, Medicare Part A is free if you have 10 years of work history in the United States and you're fully insured for Social Security benefits. Medicare Part A is free. If you're still actively working on or around the age of 65 and you're considering enrolling into Medicare and you participate in a health savings account at your employer, just know that once you enroll into Medicare, you can no longer participate in that HSA. An HSA or a health savings account is basically tax-deferred money for medical expenses. So it's almost like you're preparing in the event that, let's say you had a heart attack, a stroke, and you're worried that you might have a whole bunch of medical expenses. You can put this tax-deferred money to the side to cover those costs, so you don't have to come out of pocket the same way. I mean, it's still your money, but it's not like you're pulling money out of your checking account to pay for your hospital bill or whatever it might be that came up. All right. A part of that too is, let's say that you wait until your full retirement age to file for retirement benefits. Well, once you're past the age of 65, when you file for retirement benefits, you must take Medicare Part A. And if you're past the age of 65, you have up to 6 months of retroactivity, not to start before your 65th birthday, obviously, with Medicare Part A. And the Social Security Administration has no choice on that, so you can't decide to take the retroactive Part A or not. It's basically mandatory. So let's say you're in a position where your full retirement age is 67, you work until 67, or maybe you're going to continue to work even past that, and at your full retirement age, you no longer have a restriction to your wages. So let's say that you file for retirement benefits at your full retirement age and you plan to continue working full-time, and maybe it's in the back of your head, maybe it's not, but you're going to continue to participate in that HSA. Just know that even though you're having your retirement benefits with they might be effective with age 67, your Medicare Part A is going to have 6 months of retroactivity based off of your filing date, which is the date that you made the appointment. So let's say that you turned 67 in April and you wanted your retirement benefits to start in April, but you made the appointment this month in January, okay? Your 6 months of retroactivity on your Part A is going to be based off of the date in January that you made the appointment. So that means that your Medicare Part A is going to be backed up even when you actually have your appointment in April to sign up for April. That means that you won't get paid till May. Your Medicare Part A is still going to be retroactive all the way back to July of 2022. So if you're participating in an HSA, just know you have that 6 months of retroactivity. It might put you into a different tax year, which could create an implication for you, because once you are eligible for Medicare, you can no longer participate in that HSA. And I consult with whoever helps you do your taxes, like maybe H&R Block or whatever CPA that you use. You might even actually have a tax penalty if you did contribute and you ended up being eligible for Medicare. So just kind of plan accordingly for that. So if you were going to, if you were going to file for those benefits or something like that in whatever calendar year, maybe you make sure that, I know in January I'm going to make the appointment to file in April. That's going to back me up 6 months. So I want to make sure that I talk to my HR person at my job and that I no longer participate in the HSA after June 30th. So there's no instance in July or moving forward where that would be a possibility. Also, hopping back to the form before we wrap up the video, realistically, when you're filling out this form, the HSA would be the only time that you might terminate your Medicare Part A. That's really the only reason, especially if you have free Medicare Part A, that's really the only reason when that instance would come up is, let's say that you weren't privy to that you couldn't continue to participate in an HSA, but you ended up filing for Medicare and found out after the fact, and now you had to terminate it to avoid any sort of tax penalty or burden, whatever the case may be. That's when you would do that. But keep in mind, again, if you're over the age of 65 and you file for retirement benefits and you're receiving a monthly check and you terminate your Medicare Part A, your monthly check will terminate as well. You would have to terminate both. So just keep that in mind, that you cannot have, if you're over the age of 65, you cannot have monthly Social Security benefits without Medicare Part A. I don't know what the reason for that is, but that is just the law. Excuse me. The last thing that we're going to touch base on this form, so we already went over all this, the articulation of why you're doing it, and this little bit right here some people might be reading and confused about. I understand that if I am required to pay for my hospital insurance, the termination of my supplemental medical insurance coverage will also end my hospital insurance coverage. So again, supplemental medical insurance is referring to Medicare Part B. Hospital insurance is referring to Medicare Part A. As I mentioned before, if you have 10 years of work history in the U.S. and you're fully insured for Social Security benefits, your Medicare Part A is free. But let's say you had little to no work history for whatever reason, and so did your spouse if you were married or had ever been married. Then at that point, you might have what's considered premium-based Medicare Part A. So this is where you have to pay for Medicare Part A. Depending on how much work history you have, there's two different premiums. There's the full premium and there's a partial premium. The full premium would be like, let's say you had absolutely no work history, no taxable income, anything like that. Then I believe the Medicare Part A full premium is somewhere in the neighborhood of like $550. And then the partial premium would be half of that. So maybe, I don't know, $275 or somewhere in that neck of the woods. So you can have an instance where some people in those positions, they might, because they can't afford Part A and Part B, right? Because that would be like $700 a month, basically. You can have Medicare Part B and refuse Medicare Part A in those instances, right? But if you had both and you terminate Medicare Part B, it would also terminate your Medicare Part A automatically. All right, so just keep that in mind. And the type of person that would usually fit into this category is somebody that might have immigrated to the United States later in life. Maybe they're a retired worker from the UK or from another country, maybe Canada, something like that. And they come to the US to, that's where they want to retire. it could be somebody like that, or maybe it's somebody, maybe you immigrated to because maybe you have kids that are older and they have kids and you want to spend your last years, maybe they live in the States and you want to spend, your last years with them. And then you're also interested in, health insurance and you have no work history at all, maybe that's your case. So it's a few different types of people that usually, fit into those categories. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please make sure to give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel and turn on your bell notifications so you're always notified whenever a new video or content is being posted. And if you had a question about anything that I covered, please leave a comment down below and I'll try and address it as soon as possible. Thank you so much and have a fantastic day.